The aroma of sizzling onions filled the kitchen as I stood by the stove, stirring the pot with practiced ease. Cooking had always been my escape, a moment of peace in a life that sometimes felt too chaotic. My husband was away on a business trip, leaving just me and Alex, my stepson, in the house. He had never shown much interest in me before, not in a disrespectful way, but rather in the distant manner of a young man who barely acknowledged his stepmother beyond casual politeness. Lately, however, things had begun to change. His attitude toward me was warmer. He lingered in conversations, offered to help around the house, and even complimented my cooking, a stark contrast to his usual indifference. At first, I thought nothing of it. Perhaps he was finally accepting me as part of his life. I was lost in thought when a voice startled me from behind. "Smells good," Alex said, leaning casually against the counter. I let out a small laugh, pressing a hand to my chest. "You scared me." His lips curled into a smirk. "Didn't mean to. Just wanted to see if you needed help." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "You? Helping in the kitchen?" He chuckled, stepping closer. "Why not? I might learn a thing or two." I handed him a knife and a cutting board. "Fine, chop these." As he worked beside me, I found myself watching him out of the corner of my eye. The way he moved, the way he focused, it was different from the boy who once barely acknowledged my presence. He was a man now, and I suddenly realized how much he had changed over the years. "You're actually pretty good at this," I admitted. Alex grinned. "See? You underestimated me." We laughed, the moment surprisingly comfortable. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just two people living under the same roof, but something closer to family. He suddenly reached over to grab a seasoning bottle, brushing against my arm. It was nothing, just an accidental touch, yet something about it sent an unexpected shiver through me. I quickly turned back to the stove, shaking off the strange feeling. "So," Alex said, breaking the silence, "you've been married to Dad for, what, 5 years now?" I nodded. "Yes." He hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy?" I glanced at him, caught off guard by the question. "Of course. Why do you ask?" He shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Just curious." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I wanted to ask more, but I chose to let it go. As the food finished cooking, I stepped back, exhaling. "Dinner's ready." Alex gave me one last look before grabbing the plates. "Smells amazing as always." His voice was lighthearted, but something lingered beneath the surface, something I wasn't ready to name. I found myself growing more aware of Alex's presence in ways I hadn't before. It wasn't just that he lingered longer in conversations or that he helped more around the house, it was the way he looked at me. There was something unreadable in his gaze, something that unsettled me. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was overanalyzing harmless interactions. One evening, I was at the stove again, stirring a simmering sauce, when I sensed him behind me. I didn't turn, but I felt the shift in the air. "Need any help?" His voice was closer than usual. I forced a smile. "I think I've got it." He didn't move away. Instead, he leaned against the counter, watching me. "You work too hard, you know. You should let someone take care of you for once." I let out a short laugh. "That's sweet, but I'm fine." Silence stretched between us. Then he reached for a spoon and dipped it into the sauce before I could react. He tasted it, nodding approvingly. "Perfect. Just like always." There was nothing wrong with his words, but the way he said them made my breath hitch. I turned, finally meeting his eyes. There was warmth in them, but also something else, something unspoken, lingering beneath the surface. I cleared my throat. "Your dad should be calling soon. He said he'd check in tonight." Alex's jaw tensed slightly. "Right." He hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy with him?" I frowned, caught off guard. "Why do you keep asking me that?" He shrugged, his eyes still locked onto mine. "Just wondering if he appreciates you the way he should." His words sent a chill through me. I turned back to the stove, trying to focus, but my hands were unsteady. This wasn't right. I needed to set boundaries before things became something they shouldn't. "I know what you're doing," I said quietly, keeping my back to him. "And what am I doing?" You're blurring lines that shouldn't be blurred. He was silent for a moment. Then, he exhaled a short laugh. I just think you deserve to be seen. I spun around, my heart pounding. Alex, stop. He studied me, his expression unreadable. I will, if you really want me to. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. He took a step back, nodding slightly. Good night, he said, his voice softer now, almost regretful. I watched as he left, my chest tightening in ways I didn't understand. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like I had just let something irreversible begin. I avoided Alex the next morning, keeping myself busy with house chores, convincing myself that last night had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted, and pretending otherwise wouldn't change it. By the evening, I was back in the kitchen, trying to focus on cooking, but my mind kept replaying his words. I just think you deserve to be seen. Why had he said that? Why had it made my heart race? I gritted my teeth, frustrated with myself for even entertaining these thoughts. I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn to know it was him. You're avoiding me, he said. I've been busy. A pause. Then, liar. I inhaled sharply. Alex, don't start. I'm not starting anything. I just want to talk. I stirred the pot harder than necessary. There's nothing to talk about. I felt him move closer. Not touching me, but close enough that I could feel his warmth. My pulse quickened against my will. I don't believe that, he said softly. I turned sharply, trying to put space between us. This has to stop. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine.
Why?
Because you don't feel it? Or because you do? His words stole the breath from my lungs. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He took a slow step forward. I should have stepped back. I should have ended this before it became something it wasn't supposed to be. Instead, I stayed frozen. He reached out, hesitating for a second before gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. The touch was brief, barely there, but it sent a shiver through me. This isn't right, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Maybe, he murmured, but that doesn't mean it isn't real. My chest tightened, a war raging inside me. I could feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had a husband. I had a life built on trust. And yet, standing here in this moment, I felt more alive than I had in years. I needed to end this before it went too far. I took a shaky breath and stepped back. You need to go, Alex. His jaw tensed, but he nodded. If that's what you want. I forced myself to hold his gaze. It is. He exhaled, a slow, measured breath. All right. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my hands trembling, my heart pounding, and the undeniable truth settling deep in my bones. This wasn't over. Not yet. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying everything, his words, the way he looked at me, the moment I didn't stop him fast enough. Guilt pressed down on me, suffocating. I had to fix this before it spiraled into something that couldn't be undone. By morning, I had made up my mind. I would put distance between us. I would remind him, and myself, that this was a mistake. That whatever unspoken thing had been growing between us had to end. But when I saw Alex at breakfast, he acted as if nothing had happened. He greeted me casually, made small talk, even laughed at something on his phone. It was unnerving how easily he could pretend, as if he wasn't the one who had shattered the fragile line between us. I waited until my husband came home that evening. The moment he walked in, relief flooded me. His presence was a reminder of what was real, what mattered. I threw myself into conversation with him, clinging to the familiarity of our life together. But every time I glanced at Alex, he was watching me, calm, unreadable. During dinner, I barely tasted the food. My husband talked about work, oblivious to the storm inside me. Alex, on the other hand, was too quiet, too controlled. And then, out of nowhere, he spoke. You should teach me how to cook sometime, he said, his voice light. The words seemed harmless, but there was something in the way he said them. My husband chuckled, nodding. That's a great idea. She's an amazing cook. Alex's eyes didn't leave mine. Yeah, she is. I gripped my fork, forcing a smile, pretending I didn't hear the weight behind those words. After dinner, I found him alone in the kitchen, rinsing his plate. I knew I couldn't avoid this conversation any longer. This stops now, I said quietly. He didn't turn, just kept washing. I told you, I'd stop if you wanted me to. I do, I said, more forcefully this time. Finally, he looked at me. Are you sure? I swallowed hard. Yes. For a moment, he just stood there, studying me, as if searching for a crack in my resolve. Then he nodded. Okay. That should have been the end of it. But as he turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. Without looking back, he said, You felt it too, didn't you? The air left my lungs. I didn't answer. I couldn't. When he walked away, I was left standing in the kitchen, staring at the empty space where he had been, my chest tight, my mind screaming that this should have never happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore the truth. He was right. I had felt it too.